Question 1. The assessment process reveals that a critical document file, suspected to contain evidence of illicit activity, is not immediately accessible through standard file system browsing. Forensic imaging of the storage media has been completed. Analysis of the file system metadata indicates that the file's data blocks are scattered across multiple non-contiguous locations on the disk. What is the most appropriate next step for the forensic examiner to ensure the integrity and completeness of this potential evidence? Option A. Conclude that the file is irretrievably corrupted and therefore inadmissible as evidence, focusing only on contiguous files. Option B. Attempt to defragment the storage media using standard operating system utilities to consolidate the file's data blocks into a contiguous location. Option C. Utilize forensic tools designed to reconstruct fragmented files by analyzing file system structures and data block relationships to recover the complete file. Option D. Directly copy the visible portions of the file from the file system and present them as the complete evidence, disregarding the scattered data blocks. Correct answer is C. Utilize forensic tools designed to reconstruct fragmented files by analyzing file system structures and data block relationships to recover the complete file. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in digital forensics: the impact of file system fragmentation on evidence integrity and retrieval. Fragmentation, where parts of a file are scattered across different physical locations on a storage medium, can obscure the original structure of data, making it difficult to reconstruct and analyze. For a certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, understanding fragmentation is crucial for adhering to the principles of evidence preservation and accurate analysis, as mandated by the CFCE ethical guidelines and the general principles of digital forensic investigations. The correct approach involves recognizing fragmentation as a factor that can affect data accessibility and integrity, and employing forensic tools and techniques that can account for and reconstruct fragmented files. This aligns with the CFCE responsibility to conduct thorough and accurate examinations, ensuring that all relevant data is identified and preserved in a forensically sound manner. The goal is to present a complete and unaltered picture of the digital evidence, which includes addressing the complexities introduced by fragmentation. Incorrect approaches often stem from a misunderstanding of fragmentation's impact or a failure to employ appropriate methodologies. For instance, assuming that a file's contiguous presence on disk is the only indicator of its existence or completeness is a significant oversight. This can lead to the overlooking of fragmented evidence, thereby compromising the thoroughness of the investigation. Another failure could be attempting to defragment the drive in a way that alters the original state of the data, which violates the principle of maintaining the integrity of the evidence. Such actions could be considered negligent and could lead to the inadmissibility of the evidence in legal proceedings, as it would demonstrate a lack of adherence to forensic best practices. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the presence and extent of fragmentation. Then, they must select and apply forensic tools capable of handling fragmented data, such as file carving utilities or specialized file system analysis tools. The decision-making process should prioritize the preservation of the original evidence state, followed by the accurate reconstruction and analysis of all relevant data, regardless of its fragmentation. This systematic approach ensures that the examination is both comprehensive and forensically sound. Question 2. Benchmark analysis indicates that rapid assessment of system startup integrity is often required in investigations. Considering the strict adherence to forensic principles and the regulatory framework for the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) certification, which of the following approaches best preserves the integrity of the boot process and associated startup files for subsequent analysis? Option A. Booting the suspect system directly from its internal hard drive and using native operating system tools to examine startup configurations. Option B. Creating a forensically sound, bit-for-bit image of the suspect storage media, and then analyzing the boot sector and startup file artifacts from this read-only image using specialized forensic software. Option C. Running standard operating system diagnostic tools directly on the suspect drive to check for boot errors and analyze startup program entries. Option D. Modifying the BIOS/UEFI boot order to boot from a live forensic distribution directly from the suspect drive to access startup files. The correct answer is A. booting the suspect system directly from its internal hard drive, and using native operating system tools to examine startup configurations. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the need to quickly and accurately assess the integrity of a system's boot process without causing further alteration or compromising evidence. The urgency often stems from a need to understand system behavior, identify potential malware persistence mechanisms, or reconstruct a timeline of events. The challenge lies in balancing the speed of analysis with the strict adherence to forensic principles and the specific regulatory framework governing the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) certification. The CFCE framework emphasizes meticulous documentation, preservation of evidence integrity, and the use of validated tools and methodologies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging forensic tools that can analyze boot sectors and startup files from an unmounted or read-only image of the storage media. This ensures that the original evidence remains unaltered, specifically examining the master boot record (MBR), volume boot record (VBR), and associated startup files like boot, ini, BCD store, or registry hives related to startup programs. Using specialized forensic software allows for a non-intrusive examination. This aligns with CFCE best practices by prioritizing evidence preservation and employing methodologies that minimize the risk of data alteration, thereby maintaining the admissibility of findings in legal proceedings. The CFCE framework implicitly requires adherence to principles of sound forensic science, which include maintaining the integrity of the evidence. Incorrect approaches analysis. Booting the suspect system directly from its internal hard drive is a critical regulatory and ethical failure. This action directly modifies the system's state, potentially overriding critical forensic artifacts in the boot process, such as log files or newly created temporary files. It violates the fundamental principle of evidence preservation, a cornerstone of digital forensics, and implicitly mandated by the CFCE emphasis on sound forensic methodology. Such an approach would render any subsequent analysis unreliable and inadmissible. Modifying the boot order in the BIOS/UEFI to boot from a live forensic distribution without first creating a forensic image is another significant failure. While booting from a live distribution is a common forensic technique, doing so on the original media without imaging first means the live OS will interact with and potentially alter the suspect drive's file system and boot records. This direct interaction with the evidence, without a forensically sound copy, compromises its integrity and violates the principle of non-alteration. Running standard operating system diagnostic tools directly on the suspect drive without creating a forensic image is also professionally unacceptable. These tools are not designed for forensic analysis and can inadvertently modify file system metadata, timestamps, or even attempt to fix errors, thereby altering the evidence. This approach lacks the rigor and control required by forensic standards and would be considered a breach of professional duty under the CFCE framework. Professional reasoning. When faced with a scenario involving the boot process, a forensic examiner must first prioritize the creation of a forensically sound image of the suspect media. This image serves as a bit-for-bit copy, ensuring that the original evidence is preserved. Subsequent analysis should always be performed on this image, using validated forensic tools operating in a read-only mode. The examiner must document every step taken, including the tools used, their versions, and the specific commands executed. This meticulous documentation is crucial for demonstrating the integrity of the forensic process and the reliability of the findings, aligning with the rigorous standards expected of a CFCE. The decision-making process should always begin with the question, how can I examine this evidence without altering it? Question 3. The evaluation methodology shows that to ensure the integrity of digital evidence, an examiner has several options for acquiring and preserving data from a suspect device. Considering the fundamental principles of forensic science and the requirements for maintaining evidence admissibility, which of the following acquisition and preservation methods is the most professionally sound and ethically compliant approach? Option A. Directly analyzing the live operating system and its contents without creating a copy. Option B. Performing a simple file copy of all user-accessible files from the suspect device. Option C. Creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect storage media. Option D. utilizing a proprietary data acquisition tool that claims to preserve all data without providing detailed validation of its process. The correct answer is C. Creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the suspect storage media. Explanation: the evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in a digital forensic investigation where the integrity of evidence is paramount. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate method for data preservation and analysis to ensure admissibility in a legal proceeding, adhering strictly to the principles of forensic science and the specific guidelines governing the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) certification. This requires a deep understanding of how different methodologies impact the chain of custody, the potential for data alteration, and the ability to present findings credibly. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of the original evidence in its most pristine state before any analysis is performed. This aligns with the fundamental forensic science principle of maintaining evidence integrity. By creating a bit-for-bit forensic image, the examiner ensures that the original data remains untouched, thereby preventing any accidental or intentional modification. This process is crucial for establishing the authenticity and reliability of the evidence, which is a cornerstone of admissibility in legal contexts. The CFCE certification emphasizes adherence to established forensic protocols, and imaging is a universally accepted first step in digital forensics to safeguard against data alteration and to provide a verifiable copy for independent examination. An incorrect approach that involves directly analyzing the live system without creating an image fails to uphold the principle of evidence preservation. This method risks altering volatile data, such as system logs, running processes, and network connections, which are often critical to an investigation. Such alteration would constitute a significant regulatory and ethical failure, as it compromises the integrity of the evidence and could lead to its inadmissibility. Furthermore, it violates the expectation of impartiality and objectivity required of a forensic examiner. Another incorrect approach, which involves performing analysis on a copy of the data that is not a bit-for-bit forensic image, e.g., a simple file copy, is also professionally unacceptable. A simple file copy does not preserve metadata, file system structures, or deleted data in the same way a forensic image does. This can lead to incomplete or misleading analytical results, again jeopardizing evidence integrity and potentially leading to incorrect conclusions. This failure to employ a recognized forensic methodology is a breach of professional standards and ethical obligations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the evidence acquisition and preservation options. This begins with identifying the type of evidence and its volatility. The examiner must then select a method that minimizes the risk of alteration and maximizes the preservation of all relevant data. This involves consulting established forensic best practices and guidelines, such as those implicitly or explicitly referenced by the CFCE certification. The decision should always prioritize the integrity of the original evidence, followed by the creation of a forensically sound copy for analysis. Documentation of every step taken, including the tools and methods used, is also critical for maintaining the chain of custody and ensuring transparency. Question 4. Quality control measures reveal that a critical piece of digital evidence, a hard drive seized from a suspect's workstation, was temporarily stored in a non-secure office location for approximately 48 hours before being transferred to the secure evidence locker. During this period, it is unclear who had physical access to the drive or if any actions were taken on it. The forensic examiner is now preparing to analyze the drive. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure the integrity and admissibility of this digital evidence, adhering strictly to U.S. regulatory frameworks and CFCE best practices? Option A. Immediately halt the analysis, document the unauthorized storage period and potential access in a detailed incident report, and consult with legal counsel and the case supervisor to determine the next steps, which may include reseizing the drive or seeking court orders for its examination. Option B. Proceed with the forensic analysis as planned, assuming no compromise occurred, and document the storage anomaly in the final report. Option C. Attempt to recreate the chain of custody by having the individual who last possessed the drive sign a backdated log entry for the period it was in the non-secure location. Option D. Conduct a preliminary integrity check of the drive using hashing algorithms and if the hashes match the initial acquisition hashes, proceed with the analysis, considering the storage anomaly a minor procedural lapse. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the forensic analysis as planned, assuming no compromise occurred, and document the storage anomaly in the final report. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for evidence compromise, which directly impacts the integrity and admissibility of digital evidence in legal proceedings. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining an unbroken chain of custody, a fundamental principle in forensic investigations. Failure to adhere to strict handling procedures can render evidence unreliable, leading to case dismissal or unfavorable outcomes. The CFCE certification emphasizes rigorous adherence to established protocol to prevent such failures. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the digital evidence from acquisition to presentation. This involves meticulous documentation of every step, including who handled the evidence, when, where, and what actions were taken. This aligns with the principles of digital forensics as outlined in relevant U.S. legal frameworks and guidelines, which mandate that evidence must be collected, preserved, and analyzed in a manner that ensures its authenticity and integrity. Proper documentation is crucial for demonstrating that the evidence has not been tampered with, altered, or contaminated. An incorrect approach that involves transferring evidence to an unauthorized individual without proper documentation or authorization represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This breaches the chain of custody, creating a gap that can be exploited by opposing counsel to challenge the evidence's admissibility. It violates the principle of accountability and can lead to accusations of evidence tampering or mishandling. Another incorrect approach, such as failing to document the environmental conditions under which the evidence was stored, can also be problematic. While not as severe as unauthorized transfer, it can still raise questions about potential degradation or alteration of the evidence, especially for sensitive media. The absence of such documentation weakens the forensic examiner's ability to defend the evidence's condition. A third incorrect approach, like relying solely on the digital signature of a file without verifying the integrity of the storage medium itself, is also a failure. While digital signatures are important, they only attest to the file's integrity at a specific point in time. If the storage medium itself is compromised, the signature becomes irrelevant. This overlooks the broader aspects of evidence preservation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific legal and regulatory requirements governing evidence handling in the relevant jurisdiction. This involves a thorough review of established forensic guidelines and best practices. When faced with a situation like this, the professional must immediately assess the potential impact on the chain of custody and evidence integrity. The priority is always to maintain an unbroken, documented chain. Any deviation must be justified, documented, and approved through established protocols. If a deviation is unavoidable, immediate steps must be taken to mitigate the risk and re-establish the chain of custody with comprehensive documentation. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that a critical server motherboard, suspected of containing evidence of unauthorized access, has been physically tampered with prior to the arrival of the forensic team. Visible damage is present on the motherboard, and a solid-state drive is directly connected to it. The forensic team has been tasked with acquiring all relevant digital evidence. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the forensic examiner regarding the motherboard and its directly attached solid-state drive? Option A. Proceed with a visual inspection of the motherboard and connected peripherals, but defer imaging the solid-state drive until the extent of the physical damage is fully assessed by a hardware specialist. Option B. Attempt to boot the server with the compromised motherboard to access the operating system and begin data extraction directly. Option C. Immediately connect the solid-state drive to a forensic workstation using a write blocker and create a forensic image, while meticulously documenting the physical condition of the motherboard and any visible damage. Option D. Disassemble the motherboard to attempt direct chip-level data recovery from the solid-state drive and other components. Correct answer is C. Immediately connect the solid-state drive to a forensic workstation using a write blocker and create a forensic image, while meticulously documenting the physical condition of the motherboard and any visible damage. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of the physical evidence, specifically the motherboard and its directly attached peripherals, is compromised before a full forensic imaging process can be completed. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid evidence acquisition with the imperative to maintain the chain of custody and prevent data alteration. The forensic examiner must make critical decisions about how to proceed with the examination of these components without introducing further contamination or losing potentially vital forensic data. The urgency of the situation, coupled with the potential for the evidence to be deemed inadmissible if handled improperly, necessitates a meticulous and well-justified approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the state of the motherboard and its directly attached peripherals at the time of discovery, including any visible damage or modifications. This documentation should be thorough, utilizing high-resolution photography and detailed written notes. Following this, the examiner should proceed with a forensically sound method to preserve the data on any directly connected storage devices, e.g., SSD, HDD, by imaging them using write-blocking hardware. If the motherboard itself contains non-volatile memory that could hold forensic data, e.g., BIOS settings, firmware logs, specialized techniques for acquiring data from these components, if feasible and forensically sound, should be employed. This approach upholds the principles of digital forensic science by prioritizing data integrity, maintaining a verifiable chain of custody, and ensuring that all actions are documented and repeatable. This aligns with the CFCE emphasis on adhering to established forensic methodologies and best practices, which are implicitly governed by the need for evidence to be admissible in legal proceedings. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with a direct examination of the motherboard and its attached peripherals without proper documentation and write blocking for any connected storage devices is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action risks altering volatile data or introducing changes to the evidence, thereby compromising its integrity and potentially rendering it inadmissible. It violates the fundamental principle of do no harm in digital forensics. Attempting to boot the system with the compromised motherboard to access data directly from the operating system, without first ensuring the integrity of the storage media and documenting the boot process, is another critical failure. This action can lead to the modification of log files, temporary files, and other critical forensic artifacts, destroying valuable evidence. It bypasses essential forensic procedures designed to preserve the original state of the data. Disassembling the motherboard and attempting to recover data from individual chips without a clear forensic plan and proper tools, and without documenting each step meticulously, is also professionally unacceptable. This approach can lead to irreversible damage to the components and the loss of data. It lacks the systematic and defensible methodology required in forensic investigations and fails to adhere to the principles of evidence handling. Professional reasoning. In situations involving potentially compromised physical evidence, a forensic examiner must adopt a systematic decision-making process. This begins with a thorough assessment of the evidence's condition and potential for data preservation. The examiner should then consult established digital forensic guidelines and best practices, such as those implicitly expected by the CFCE certification, to determine the most appropriate and forensically sound methods for acquisition and analysis. Documentation is paramount at every stage, ensuring a clear and verifiable record of all actions taken. If there is any doubt about the integrity of a particular component or the feasibility of a specific recovery technique, the examiner should err on the side of caution, prioritizing preservation and seeking expert consultation if necessary. The ultimate goal is to collect evidence that is both relevant and admissible in a legal context, which requires unwavering adherence to scientific principles and ethical standards. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a forensic computer examiner to assess the initial circumstances of a potential digital evidence discovery. Given a scenario where a company's internal IT department reports suspicious activity on a server and requests an immediate forensic examination, what is the most critical first step to ensure the integrity and admissibility of any subsequent findings? Option A. Obtain clear, written authorization from a designated company authority or legal counsel outlining the scope of the examination. Option B. Secure the server physically to prevent any further unauthorized access or modification. Option C. Immediately begin a forensic imaging of the server to preserve its current state. Option D. Conduct a preliminary, non-intrusive review of system logs to identify the nature of the suspicious activity. Correct answer is C. Immediately begin a forensic imaging of the server to preserve its current state. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the initial scope of an investigation is unclear, and the potential for data spoliation is high due to the dynamic nature of digital evidence. The urgency to preserve evidence while also understanding its relevance requires a methodical and legally sound approach. The challenge lies in balancing the need for immediate action with the requirement for proper authorization and documentation, all within the strict confines of the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) examination's regulatory framework, which implicitly aligns with U.S. federal legal standards for digital evidence handling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes obtaining proper legal authorization before commencing any forensic examination. This aligns with fundamental legal principles governing search and seizure, particularly the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. In a digital forensics context, this translates to ensuring that any examination of digital devices is conducted under a warrant or with explicit consent from the owner or authorized individual. This ensures the admissibility of evidence in legal proceedings and upholds the integrity of the investigation. The CFCE certification, by its nature, prepares examiners to operate within these legal boundaries. Documenting all actions meticulously from the outset, including the scope of authorization, is crucial for chain of custody and demonstrating due diligence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the forensic examination without explicit legal authorization, relying solely on the perceived urgency of the situation. This directly violates Fourth Amendment principles and can lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence in court. It demonstrates a failure to understand the legal prerequisites for digital evidence acquisition and preservation, a core competency expected of a CFCE. Another incorrect approach is to delay the examination indefinitely while waiting for perfect, all-encompassing authorization, potentially allowing critical evidence to be altered or destroyed. While authorization is paramount, a reasonable and documented effort to obtain it promptly, coupled with interim preservation measures, if legally permissible and documented, is often necessary. This approach fails to balance legal requirements with the practical realities of digital evidence volatility. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a superficial examination to get a feel for the data before seeking formal authorization. This is problematic because even a superficial examination can alter the state of the digital media, potentially leading to spoliation. It also blurs the lines of authorized access and can be construed as an unauthorized search, undermining the legal basis for the entire investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in digital forensics must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes legal compliance and evidence integrity. This involves 1. Understanding the legal authority for the examination. Is there a warrant, consent, or other legal basis? 2. Clearly defining the scope of the authorized examination. 3. Documenting all actions, including the basis for authority and any limitations. 4. Employing forensically sound methods to preserve and acquire evidence. 5. Continuously assessing the legal and ethical implications of each step. When faced with ambiguous situations, seeking guidance from legal counsel or the case's lead investigator is essential to ensure adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. Question 7. Benchmark analysis indicates that a Certified Forensic Computer Examiner, CFCE, has completed a thorough digital forensic examination of a suspect's laptop, uncovering evidence of data deletion and modification. During direct examination, the examiner is asked to explain the implications of this evidence for the alleged criminal activity. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the CFCE ethical obligations and the requirements for expert witness testimony in U.S. courts? Option A. Emphasize the most incriminating aspects of the forensic findings, downplaying any evidence that might suggest alternative interpretations or innocent explanations to strongly support the prosecution's case. Option B. Refuse to answer questions during cross-examination that delve into the broader context of the case, asserting that the examiner's role is limited solely to the technical aspects of the forensic examination. Option C. Offer an opinion on the suspect's likely intent based on the pattern of data deletion, drawing inferences from common criminal behaviors observed in similar cases. Option D. Present the forensic findings clearly and objectively, explaining the technical processes used to recover and analyze the data, and stating any limitations of the findings without offering speculative conclusions about the suspect's intent or guilt. The correct answer is D. Present the forensic findings clearly and objectively, explaining the technical processes used to recover and analyze the data, and stating any limitations of the findings without offering speculative conclusions about the suspect's intent or guilt. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the forensic examiner's duty to present objective findings and the adversarial nature of legal proceedings. The examiner must navigate the complexities of court procedures, including rules of evidence and the expectations of legal professionals, while maintaining scientific integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure testimony is both accurate and admissible, avoiding any actions that could compromise the investigation or the examiner's credibility. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres to the fundamental principles of expert witness testimony as outlined by the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner, CFCE, framework and relevant U.S. legal standards. This involves a thorough understanding of the case facts, the forensic evidence, and the applicable rules of evidence, presenting findings clearly, concisely, and without speculation, while being prepared to explain methodologies and limitations under cross-examination, upholds the examiner's role as an impartial expert. This approach ensures that the testimony is reliable, relevant, and assists the trier of fact in understanding complex technical issues, thereby complying with ethical obligations and legal requirements for expert testimony. An incorrect approach that involves introducing speculative opinions not directly supported by the forensic evidence fails to meet the standard of expert testimony. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it violates the principle of objectivity and can mislead the court, potentially leading to an unjust outcome. Such speculation can be grounds for disqualification of the expert or impeachment of their testimony. Another incorrect approach, that of refusing to answer questions on cross-examination that are within the scope of the examiner's expertise, even if challenging, represents a failure to fulfill the duty of an expert witness. This can be interpreted as an attempt to obstruct justice or an unwillingness to be held accountable for the findings, which is a significant ethical and professional failing. It undermines the adversarial process and the court's ability to fully assess the evidence. A further incorrect approach, that of tailoring findings to support a particular party's narrative rather than presenting objective results, is a severe ethical breach and a violation of the core tenets of forensic science. This constitutes a direct compromise of integrity and impartiality, which are paramount for an expert witness. Such conduct can lead to severe professional repercussions, including loss of certification and legal sanctions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a rigorous self-assessment of the evidence and the examiner's own knowledge. For testifying, the examiner must review all findings, anticipate potential lines of questioning, and be prepared to explain their reasoning and limitations. If a question falls outside their expertise, they should state so clearly. If a question requires interpretation of facts beyond the forensic evidence, they should clarify the basis of their answer. The guiding principle should always be to provide truthful, objective, and relevant information to assist the court, consistent with the CFCE Code of Ethics and applicable legal rules. Question 8. Market research demonstrates that digital evidence, particularly data stored in cloud services, can be ephemeral. A certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, is investigating a case involving potential financial fraud. The examiner has identified that crucial evidence may reside in the suspect's personal cloud storage account, which is accessible via the internet. The suspect is not currently in custody, and there is a concern that the suspect might delete the data if they become aware of the investigation. The examiner has a strong suspicion, but not yet a confirmed warrant, that the cloud storage contains evidence of the fraud. What is the most appropriate course of action for the CFCE to take to ensure legal and ethical compliance while attempting to preserve potential evidence? Option A. Access the suspect's personal cloud storage account using publicly available information or social engineering tactics to gain entry, arguing that the data is not adequately protected. Option B. Consult with legal counsel to determine the feasibility of obtaining an emergency warrant or to secure a standard search warrant for the suspect's personal cloud storage account based on the existing suspicion and the potential for data destruction. Option C. Request the cloud service provider to unilaterally preserve the data based on the suspicion of criminal activity without providing specific legal authorization. Option D. Immediately access the suspect's personal cloud storage account to download the data before it can be deleted, citing the potential for data loss as an exigent circumstance. The correct answer is D. Immediately access the suspect's personal cloud storage account to download the data before it can be deleted, citing the potential for data loss as an exigent circumstance. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics, balancing the need for timely evidence collection with the constitutional protections afforded to individuals. The core tension lies in obtaining digital evidence that may be volatile or rapidly changing, while strictly adhering to the Fourth Amendment's requirement for probable cause and a warrant, or a recognized exception to that requirement. The professional challenge is to navigate these legal constraints without compromising the integrity of the investigation or the admissibility of the evidence. The correct approach prioritizes obtaining a warrant based on probable cause before accessing the suspect's personal cloud storage. This aligns directly with the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. By seeking a warrant, the forensic examiner demonstrates due diligence and respect for legal boundaries. This process ensures that a neutral and detached magistrate has reviewed the evidence and determined that probable cause exists, thereby legitimizing the search. This is best professional practice because it safeguards individual privacy rights and ensures that any evidence obtained is legally admissible in court, preventing potential dismissal of charges due to procedural errors. An incorrect approach would be to immediately access the cloud storage without a warrant, even if the examiner believes the data might be deleted. This action directly violates the Fourth Amendment. The belief that data might be deleted does not, in itself, constitute an exception to the warrant requirement, unless specific exigent circumstances can be demonstrated and articulated to a magistrate. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on a broad, unsubstantiated claim of consent from a third party who may not have the legal authority to grant access to the suspect's private data. This bypasses the established legal safeguards and could lead to the suppression of evidence. A further incorrect approach would be to interpret a general company policy regarding data access as a blanket authorization to search personal cloud storage without specific probable cause and a warrant, especially when the storage is personal in nature and not directly related to company business operations. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the Fourth Amendment and its exceptions. When faced with potential data volatility, the examiner should first assess if exigent circumstances truly exist and can be articulated to a magistrate for an emergency warrant. If not, the priority is to work with legal counsel to obtain a standard search warrant. Documentation of all steps taken, communications with legal authorities, and the rationale behind each decision is paramount. This systematic approach ensures legal compliance, ethical conduct, and the integrity of the forensic investigation. Question 9. The risk matrix shows a high probability of critical evidence residing on a suspect's personal laptop, which was discovered at a scene where a crime is alleged to have occurred. The investigating officer requests immediate forensic imaging of the laptop to preserve potential evidence. However, no warrant or explicit legal authorization for the seizure or examination of this specific device has yet been obtained. Which of the following actions best represents the legally and ethically sound approach for a certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, in this situation? Option A. Obtain consent from the owner of the laptop to perform the forensic imaging, even if the owner is a suspect in the crime. Option B. Proceed with the forensic imaging of the laptop immediately to prevent potential data loss, assuming that the evidence will be validated later through a warrant. Option C. Seize the laptop and conduct a preliminary forensic examination to identify critical evidence, with the intention of obtaining a warrant based on the initial findings. Option D. Advise the investigating officer that forensic imaging cannot proceed without a valid warrant or legal authorization, and explain the legal implications of unauthorized access and seizure of digital devices. The correct answer is D. Advise the investigating officer that forensic imaging cannot proceed without a valid warrant or legal authorization, and explain the legal implications of unauthorized access and seizure of digital devices. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a digital forensic examiner to navigate the complex intersection of technical evidence collection and the strict legal requirements of evidence admissibility. The examiner must balance the need for thoroughness in data acquisition with the imperative to avoid actions that could render the evidence inadmissible in court. This involves understanding the chain of custody, the principles of evidence integrity, and the specific legal standards for digital evidence in the relevant jurisdiction. Failure to adhere to these legal mandates can have severe consequences, including the dismissal of charges or civil claims. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes obtaining a warrant or appropriate legal authorization before accessing or seizing digital devices. This aligns directly with fundamental legal principles protecting individuals from unreasonable searches and seizures, as enshrined in the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. For a certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, adhering to these legal prerequisites is paramount. Obtaining a warrant ensures that the search is conducted within defined legal boundaries, specifying the scope of the search and the types of data that can be collected. This process safeguards the integrity of the investigation and ensures that any evidence obtained will be admissible in court, as it demonstrates due process was followed. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with data acquisition without a warrant, relying on the assumption that the data is publicly accessible or that the individual has implicitly consented. This violates the Fourth Amendment's protection against warrantless searches of private digital devices. Even if data appears accessible, the expectation of privacy in digital information is high, and unauthorized access can lead to the suppression of evidence. Another incorrect approach is to seize devices without proper documentation of the chain of custody. The chain of custody is a critical legal requirement for evidence admissibility. It documents the handling of evidence from the moment it is collected to its presentation in court, ensuring its integrity and preventing tampering. Failure to meticulously document every transfer and handling of the digital evidence can create reasonable doubt about its authenticity and lead to its exclusion. A third incorrect approach is to conduct a forensic examination that exceeds the scope defined in a warrant or legal authorization. If a warrant authorizes the collection of specific types of data, deviating from that scope, even if the additional data is relevant, can be considered an unlawful search. This can lead to the exclusion of all evidence obtained during that examination, regardless of its relevance. Professional reasoning. When faced with a situation involving potential digital evidence, a CFCE must first ascertain the legal authority to access and collect that evidence. This involves understanding the jurisdictional requirements for search warrants, subpoenas, or other legal instruments. If such authorization is lacking, the examiner must not proceed with intrusive data collection. Instead, they should communicate the legal requirements to the investigating authority. If authorization is obtained, the examiner must meticulously adhere to its terms and maintain an unbroken chain of custody throughout the forensic process. This systematic approach, grounded in legal compliance and evidence integrity, is the bedrock of professional digital forensic practice. Question 10. The monitoring system demonstrates unusual network activity originating from a server running a proprietary operating system. As a certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, you are tasked with investigating this activity. The server is currently operational and accessible. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to preserve potential evidence? Option A. Contact the system administrator to request a full backup of the server's data and then proceed with the analysis of the backup. Option B. Obtain a forensically sound image of the server's storage media while the system is still running, taking precautions to minimize system changes and document all actions. Option C. Immediately power down the server to prevent further unauthorized access and then create a forensic image of the storage media. Option D. Connect to the live operating system and begin searching for log files and network connection records directly on the server. The correct answer is C. Immediately power down the server to prevent further unauthorized access and then create a forensic image of the storage media. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between the duty to preserve evidence and the obligation to maintain system integrity and user privacy, all within the strict confines of the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) regulatory framework. The examiner must navigate the technical complexities of the operating system and hardware while adhering to legal and ethical standards governing digital evidence. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken are legally permissible, technically sound, and do not compromise the integrity of the investigation or the evidence itself. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of volatile data and the integrity of the system, which are fundamental tenets of digital forensics. This aligns with CFCE guidelines that emphasize a methodical and forensically sound process. By creating a forensic image of the storage media, the examiner ensures that the original evidence remains unaltered, allowing for multiple analyses without risk of contamination. This also respects the chain of custody and provides a verifiable record of the data. Furthermore, documenting all actions taken is crucial for admissibility in legal proceedings and demonstrates adherence to professional standards. An incorrect approach that involves directly modifying the live operating system to search for specific files without first creating a forensic image is professionally unacceptable. This action violates the principle of preserving the original evidence. Any modification to the live system, even for the purpose of locating evidence, can alter timestamps, delete temporary files, or overwrite data, thereby compromising the integrity of the evidence and potentially rendering it inadmissible. This failure directly contravenes CFCE ethical guidelines and best practices for digital evidence handling. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the potential for volatile data, such as running processes or network connections, and proceed directly to imaging the storage. Volatile data can be lost as soon as the system is powered down or manipulated. Failing to capture this data when possible represents a significant oversight in a thorough forensic examination and can lead to incomplete evidence. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of operating system fundamentals and their impact on digital evidence. A third incorrect approach would be to conduct the examination without proper authorization or documentation. Digital forensics is a regulated field. An unauthorized access or analysis can have legal repercussions. The CFCE framework mandates strict adherence to legal authority and meticulous documentation of all investigative steps. Failing to obtain proper authorization or to document the process thoroughly undermines the credibility of the findings and the examiner. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, understand the scope of the investigation and the legal authority granted. Second, assess the system for volatile data and plan for its preservation. Third, create a forensically sound image of the storage media. Fourth, conduct the analysis on the forensic image, not the original evidence. Fifth, meticulously document every step, tool, and finding. Finally, maintain the integrity of the evidence throughout the entire process. Question 11. The control framework reveals a critical incident requiring immediate live response on a Mac OS workstation. The primary objective is to capture volatile data from system memory to identify active malicious processes and network connections. Given the constraints of a live system, which of the following methodologies best adheres to forensically sound principles for memory acquisition on Mac OS? Option A. Utilize a specialized, forensically validated memory acquisition tool designed for Mac OS that operates with elevated privileges to create a bit-for-bit image of physical memory. Option B. Execute a custom shell script that attempts to read memory regions using standard user privileges and pipes the output to a file on an external drive. Option C. Manually inspect running processes and network connections through the Mac OS graphical user interface and document observations. Option D. Initiate a full disk imaging process of the workstation before attempting any memory analysis to ensure all data is captured. The correct answer is B. Execute a custom shell script that attempts to read memory regions using standard user privileges and pipes the output to a file on an external drive. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in digital forensics, particularly within the context of live response and memory analysis on Mac OS systems. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for immediate data acquisition during a live system examination with the potential for altering volatile data, which is critical for forensic integrity. The urgency of a live response often conflicts with the meticulous, forensically sound methods required to preserve evidence. Professionals must make rapid decisions under pressure, knowing that any misstep could render crucial evidence inadmissible or misleading. The correct approach involves utilizing forensically sound tools and methodologies specifically designed for live Mac OS memory acquisition. This means employing tools that minimize system interaction, operate with the highest privileges necessary without causing significant disruption, and create bit-for-bit images of the physical memory. Such tools are often developed with an understanding of Mac OS kernel structures and memory management, ensuring that the acquisition process itself does not inadvertently overwrite or corrupt the very data being sought. This adherence to established forensic principles, such as maintaining the chain of custody and ensuring data integrity, is paramount and directly supported by the principles of digital forensic best practices, which are implicitly expected within the CFCE framework. An incorrect approach would be to rely on standard user-level tools or manual methods for memory dumping. For instance, attempting to copy memory contents using simple scripting or basic command line utilities that are not designed for forensic acquisition can easily lead to data corruption. These tools may not have the necessary privileges to access all memory regions, or their execution might trigger system processes that alter memory contents. This failure to use specialized forensic tools violates the principle of non-alteration of evidence. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with a full disk image acquisition before attempting memory analysis, as this is a time-consuming process that would allow volatile memory data to be overwritten by normal system operations, rendering it useless for live response purposes. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the temporal nature of volatile data and the specific requirements of live memory analysis. The professional reasoning process for such situations should begin with a clear understanding of the objectives of the examination and the nature of the data being sought. In a live response scenario involving memory, the priority is volatile data. The next step is to identify and select forensically sound tools that are known to be effective and reliable for the specific operating system and task. This involves consulting documentation, industry best practices, and prior experience. The chosen tools should be validated, and their operation should be understood in terms of their potential impact on the system. Finally, the acquisition process must be meticulously documented, including the tools used, the commands executed, and any observed system behavior, to ensure the integrity and admissibility of the collected evidence. Question 12. System analysis indicates that a Windows workstation may have been accessed by an unauthorized user, potentially altering critical security settings and user account privileges. As a certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, what is the most appropriate initial step to preserve and analyze evidence related to user accounts and security configurations? Option A. Directly log into the workstation using administrative credentials to review the user account properties and security group memberships through the operating system's built-in management tools. Option B. Ask the primary user of the workstation to provide a list of all user accounts and their associated security permissions as they understand them. Option C. Attempt to restore the workstation's security settings to a known good state based on system documentation before performing any analysis. Option D. Create a forensically sound, bit-for-bit image of the workstation storage media using a hardware write blocker, and then analyze this image using specialized forensic software to examine user account information and security settings. The correct answer is D. Create a forensically sound, bit-for-bit image of the workstation storage media using a hardware write blocker, and then analyze this image using specialized forensic software to examine user account information and security settings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of user account information and security settings is paramount for establishing a factual basis for an investigation. The difficulty lies in accurately identifying and preserving evidence related to user privileges, group memberships, and access control lists, ACL, without inadvertently altering them, which could compromise the investigation or lead to misinterpretations. The CFCE must navigate the technical complexities of Windows operating systems while adhering to strict legal and ethical standards for evidence handling. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves utilizing forensic tools and techniques that allow for the acquisition and analysis of user account and security setting data in a forensically sound manner. This means employing methods that do not modify the original data, such as creating bit-for-bit disk images, and then analyzing those images using specialized forensic software. This ensures that the evidence remains admissible in legal proceedings and accurately reflects the state of the system at the time of acquisition. Adherence to the principles of evidence preservation, as outlined in general forensic best practices and implicitly supported by the need for reliable evidence in any legal context, is crucial. The CFCE role is to present objective findings, and any action that could be construed as altering the evidence would violate this fundamental principle. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would involve directly interacting with the live operating system to query user account and security settings without proper precautions. For instance, using built-in Windows administrative tools to enumerate users or modify permissions on a live system could alter timestamps, security logs, or even the settings themselves, thereby destroying or corrupting the evidence. This directly violates the principle of maintaining the integrity of the original evidence. Another incorrect approach might be to rely solely on the user's verbal description of their account settings without independent forensic verification. This introduces subjectivity and hearsay, which are unacceptable in forensic investigations. Furthermore, attempting to clean up or restore security settings based on assumptions about their intended state, rather than documenting their actual state, constitutes evidence tampering and a severe ethical and professional breach. Professional reasoning. When faced with a scenario involving Windows user accounts and security settings, a CFCE must adopt a systematic and forensically sound methodology. The decision-making process should prioritize evidence preservation and integrity above all else. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant data sources, e.g., SAM database, security event logs, registry hives related to user profiles and ACLs. 2. Employing write-blocking hardware or software to prevent any modifications to the original storage media. 3. Creating a bit-for-bit forensic image of the affected storage. 4. Analyzing the forensic image using validated forensic tools. 5. Documenting all steps taken, tools used, and findings meticulously. 6. Reporting findings objectively, without speculation or alteration of the evidence. This structured approach ensures that the investigation is conducted ethically, legally, and produces reliable, admissible evidence. Question 13. Market research demonstrates that digital forensic examiners often encounter situations where file system integrity is questioned. In a scenario involving a Windows NTFS file system, where an allegation of unauthorized data deletion has been made, which approach to analyzing the master file table, MFT, and the update sequence number USN journal would best support the reconstruction of file system activity and provide the most robust evidence. Option A. An investigation that relies solely on data carving and file recovery tools to reconstruct deleted files, without a detailed analysis of the MFT or USN journal, as these artifacts may be incomplete or corrupted. Option B. An exclusive examination of the USN journal, prioritizing its chronological log of changes and disregarding the MFT unless specific file attributes are requested by legal counsel. Option C. Comprehensive analysis that cross-references entries between the MFT and the USN journal, looking for discrepancies and corroborating timestamps to reconstruct the sequence of file operations, including deletions and modifications. Option D. A primary focus on the MFT, assuming its timestamps accurately reflect all file creation, modification, and access events, and only consulting the USN journal if MFT entries appear to be missing. The correct answer is C. A comprehensive analysis that cross-references entries between the MFT and the USN journal, looking for discrepancies and corroborating timestamps to reconstruct the sequence of file operations, including deletions and modifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity and completeness of file system artifacts are paramount for establishing a timeline of events and proving or disproving allegations. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting the data within the master file table, MFT, and the USN journal, understanding their interdependencies, and recognizing potential manipulation or corruption that could obscure critical evidence. A forensic examiner must navigate the nuances of how these artifacts record file system changes, deletions, and modifications, ensuring that their conclusions are based on sound forensic principles and are defensible in a legal context. The potential for misinterpretation or overlooking subtle indicators of tampering requires a meticulous and systematic approach. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive examination of both the MFT and the USN Journal, cross-referencing their entries to reconstruct file system activity. The MFT provides a static record of files and directories, including their creation, modification, and access timestamps. The USN Journal, on the other hand, offers a dynamic chronological log of changes made to the file system, including file creation, deletion, renaming, and content modification. By correlating entries from both sources, an examiner can identify discrepancies, confirm the sequence of events, and detect potential evidence tampering. For instance, if a file is deleted according to the USN Journal, but its MFT entry remains intact, albeit with updated timestamps, it suggests a deliberate attempt to hide the deletion. This methodical cross-referencing aligns with the principles of digital forensic investigation, emphasizing the need for verifiable and reproducible findings, which is a cornerstone of professional practice and implicitly supported by the need for reliable evidence in legal proceedings. Incorrect approaches analysis. Focusing solely on the MFT without considering the USN Journal would be a significant failure. The MFT can be misleading if files have been deleted and their MFT entries overwritten or modified. Relying only on the MFT might lead to an incomplete or inaccurate timeline, missing crucial events logged in the USN Journal, such as the deletion of a file that was subsequently removed from the MFT. This overlooks the dynamic nature of file system operations and the USN Journal's role in capturing these changes. Examining only the USN Journal without consulting the MFT is also insufficient. While the USN Journal records changes, it may not always retain all the detailed metadata about a file that the MFT does, especially for older or deleted files. The MFT provides the foundational information about file attributes and existence. Without the MFT, the examiner might struggle to fully understand the context of the changes recorded in the USN Journal, such as the original location or full attributes of a file. Ignoring the possibility of data carving or file recovery techniques when analyzing these artifacts would be a professional oversight. If a file has been deleted and its MFT entry is gone or corrupted, and its USN Journal entry is also absent or incomplete, advanced recovery techniques might still be able to reconstruct the file's content or at least provide evidence of its prior existence. The absence of such consideration limits the scope of the investigation and the potential to uncover hidden evidence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes thoroughness, accuracy, and defensibility. This involves 1. Understanding the specific file system and its associated artifacts, e.g., NTFS, MFT, and USN Journal. 2. Developing a hypothesis about the events that occurred. 3. Systematically acquiring and preserving the relevant data, ensuring chain of custody. 4. Employing appropriate forensic tools and techniques to analyze the MFT and USN Journal. 5. Critically cross-referencing data from both artifacts to identify consistencies and discrepancies. 6. Considering and applying advanced data recovery and carving techniques if initial analysis is inconclusive. 7. Documenting all steps, findings, and interpretations meticulously. 8. Corroborating findings with other available evidence. 9. Being prepared to explain the methodology and findings clearly and concisely in a legal setting. Question 14. Assessment of a digital forensic investigation scenario where an examiner is tasked with recovering deleted emails from a suspect's work computer to investigate potential corporate espionage. The suspect is an employee of a company based in the UK, and the company's data protection officer has authorized the investigation. The emails may contain sensitive personal information of other employees and clients. Which of the following actions best aligns with the UK's Data Protection Act 2018, DPA 2018, and the principles of data privacy in a forensic context? Option A. Proceed with a complete acquisition and analysis of all email content, assuming that the company's authorization and the nature of the investigation provide implicit consent for processing all personal data found. Option B. Acquire all deleted email data, conduct a full content analysis, and retain all recovered data for the duration of the investigation and any subsequent legal proceedings, without specific consent from individuals whose personal data might be present. Option C. Immediately cease the investigation due to the potential presence of sensitive personal data, as obtaining explicit consent from every individual whose data might be recovered is practically impossible. Option D. Acquire only the email headers and metadata that are directly relevant to identifying the communication patterns of the suspect, and analyze these for evidence of espionage, while securely disposing of any recovered email content that is not directly pertinent to the investigation. Correct answer is B. Acquire all deleted email data, conduct a full content analysis, and retain all recovered data for the duration of the investigation and any subsequent legal proceedings, without specific consent from individuals whose personal data might be present. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the investigative need to acquire and analyze data clashes with stringent data privacy regulations. The forensic examiner must balance the imperative to uncover evidence with the legal and ethical obligations to protect personal information. Failure to do so can result in severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and compromise the admissibility of evidence. The challenge lies in identifying and applying the correct legal basis for data processing and ensuring that any processing is proportionate and necessary. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the relevant data privacy framework, in this case, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as it applies to the handling of personal data of individuals within the European Union. The examiner must identify a lawful basis for processing the personal data. Consent, if obtained properly and with full transparency, is one such basis. However, in many investigative contexts, relying on consent may not be feasible or appropriate. A more common and often legally sound basis for forensic investigations is the legitimate interest of the data controller, e.g., the organization conducting the investigation, or the performance of a task carried out in the public interest or in the exercise of official authority, provided these interests are not overridden by the fundamental rights and freedoms of the data subject. Crucially, the processing must be limited to what is strictly necessary for the investigation, and appropriate safeguards must be in place to protect the data subject's rights. This includes data minimization, purpose limitation, and secure storage and destruction of data once it is no longer needed. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with a broad data acquisition and analysis without first establishing a lawful basis for processing the personal data. This directly violates the GDPR core principles of lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. It assumes that the investigative need automatically overrides privacy rights, which is not the case under GDPR. Another incorrect approach would be to acquire and analyze all data indiscriminately, regardless of its relevance to the investigation, under the guise of thoroughness. This violates the principle of data minimization, which mandates that personal data collected should be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary in relation to the purposes for which they are processed. A third incorrect approach would be to share the acquired personal data with unauthorized third parties without a clear legal basis or consent. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and a violation of the GDPR provisions on data transfers and third-party access, potentially leading to significant fines and legal action. Professional reasoning. Forensic examiners must adopt a risk-based approach that integrates legal compliance from the outset of an investigation. This involves consulting with legal counsel or data protection officers to identify the appropriate lawful basis for processing personal data. They should document all steps taken to ensure compliance, including the justification for data acquisition, the scope of the analysis, and the measures implemented to protect data privacy. This proactive and documented approach ensures that investigations are conducted ethically and legally, preserving the integrity of the evidence and the reputation of the examiner and their organization. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that the presentation of digital evidence in a courtroom setting is a critical juncture in a forensic investigation. A certified forensic computer examiner, CFCE, has completed a thorough analysis of a suspect's hard drive, uncovering critical files that directly link the suspect to a cybercrime. The examiner is preparing to testify as an expert witness, which approach best ensures the evidence is understood and accepted by the jury while adhering to professional and legal standards. Option A. Providing a clear, concise narrative of the findings, supported by relevant exhibits and visual aids, explaining the implications of the digital evidence in plain language, and being prepared to answer questions about the technical basis of the findings. Option B. Using highly technical jargon and acronyms throughout the testimony, relying on the judge or opposing counsel to clarify any misunderstandings for the jury. Option C. Presenting a detailed, step-by-step explanation of the forensic tools and methodologies used, including technical specifications and log files, assuming the jury will grasp the significance of the technical processes. Option D. Submitting raw, uninterpreted data files from the hard drive to the court, with a brief cover letter stating that these files are the digital evidence. The correct answer is C. Presenting a detailed, step-by-step explanation of the forensic tools and methodologies used, including technical specifications and log files, assuming the jury will grasp the significance of the technical processes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a forensic examiner to navigate the delicate balance between presenting complex technical findings in a comprehensible manner for a non-technical audience jury, and adhering strictly to the established rules of evidence and forensic best practices. The risk of misinterpretation or oversimplification can lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence or, worse, a miscarriage of justice. The examiner must anticipate potential challenges to their methodology and the clarity of their presentation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes clarity, accuracy, and adherence to the Daubert standard, or its equivalent in the specified jurisdiction, which for CFCE typically implies U.S. federal rules of evidence and relevant case law. This involves presenting evidence in a way that is understandable to the jury without sacrificing technical integrity. This includes using visual aids, clear language, and providing context for technical terms. The examiner acts as an expert witness, educating the trier of fact. This approach aligns with ethical obligations to present truthful and accurate information and legal requirements to lay a proper foundation for evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis. Presenting raw, uninterpreted data without explanation fails to meet the expert witness's duty to assist the court and jury. It risks the evidence being deemed incomprehensible or irrelevant, potentially leading to its exclusion. This approach neglects the fundamental purpose of expert testimony, which is to bridge the gap between technical complexity and legal understanding. Using overly technical jargon and assuming the jury's understanding is a direct violation of the expert witness's role. It can lead to confusion, misinterpretation, and a perception that the examiner is intentionally obfuscating the facts. This can undermine credibility and lead to the evidence being disregarded. Ethically, it fails to communicate truthfully and effectively. Focusing solely on the technical details of the forensic tools used without explaining what those tools revealed about the case is a common pitfall. While tool integrity is important, the jury is interested in the results and their implications, not just the mechanics of how they were obtained. This approach can be perceived as evasive or as an attempt to impress with technical prowess rather than to inform. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the presentation of digital evidence by first understanding the audience and the legal context. This involves anticipating questions, preparing clear and concise explanation, and practicing the delivery. A structured approach, starting with the overarching findings and then delving into supporting details, is often effective. The examiner must be prepared to explain their methodology, the tools used, and the significance of the findings in a way that is both legally sound and easily understood. This requires a deep understanding of both the technical aspects of the investigation and the rules of evidence. Question 16. The monitoring system demonstrates a suspicious entry within the Windows registry that was not explicitly detailed in the initial scope of the forensic examination. This entry appears to be related to unauthorized software installation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the certified forensic computer examiner? Option A. Document the registry entry, assess its relevance to the original investigative objectives, and seek explicit authorization from the appropriate legal authority or case manager before proceeding with further analysis or reporting. Option B. Ignore the registry entry as it falls outside the defined scope of the examination and continue with the original investigative plan. Option C. Immediately report the discovery of the suspicious registry entry to the client, detailing all potential implications, without consulting the case manager or seeking further authorization. Option D. Conduct a deep analysis of the registry entry to fully understand its implications, as it may be crucial to the investigation, and then report the findings directly to the prosecuting attorney. Correct answer is A. Document the registry entry, assess its relevance to the original investigative objectives, and seek explicit authorization from the appropriate legal authority or case manager for proceeding with further analysis or reporting. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical and professional challenge in digital forensics. The examiner has discovered potentially incriminating evidence within the Windows registry that, while relevant to the investigation, was not explicitly within the initial scope. The challenge lies in balancing the duty to conduct a thorough investigation with the need to adhere to established legal and procedural boundaries, particularly concerning the scope of examination and potential privacy implications. Overstepping the defined scope can lead to evidence being inadmissible, damage to the investigation's credibility, and potential legal repercussions for the examiner. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves documenting the discovery of the registry artifact, assessing its relevance to the original investigative objectives, and then seeking explicit authorization from the appropriate legal authority or case manager before proceeding with a deeper analysis or reporting of this new information. This aligns with best professional practices in digital forensics, emphasizing adherence to scope, chain of custody, and legal authorization. The CFCE certification implicitly requires adherence to principles of due process and legal admissibility of evidence. By seeking authorization, the examiner ensures that the investigation remains within legal and ethical bounds, respecting the rights of the subject and maintaining the integrity of the forensic process. This proactive communication and adherence to scope are critical for ensuring that any discovered evidence is legally obtained and admissible in court. Incorrect approach is analysis. Pursuing a deep analysis of the registry artifact without authorization represents a failure to adhere to the defined scope of the investigation. This can lead to the exclusion of any derived evidence, as it may be deemed illegally obtained or outside the scope of the warrant or authorization. Ethically, it violates the principle of acting within defined parameters and respecting privacy beyond the investigative mandate. Reporting the registry artifact directly to the client or prosecuting attorney without first consulting with the case manager or obtaining explicit authorization is also problematic. While transparency is important, bypassing the established chain of command and authorization protocols can create procedural irregularities. This can undermine the integrity of the forensic report and potentially compromise the investigation by prematurely revealing information that has not been properly vetted or authorized for disclosure. Ignoring the registry artifact and proceeding solely with the original scope, despite its potential relevance, is a failure to conduct a sufficiently thorough investigation. While adhering to scope is crucial, a competent forensic examiner should recognize and document potentially significant findings, even if they fall slightly outside the initial parameters, to inform subsequent investigative decisions. This approach risks overlooking critical evidence that could be vital to the case. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should follow a structured decision-making process. First, meticulously document the discovery, including its location within the registry, its potential significance, and the exact time of discovery. Second, compare the discovered artifact against the original investigative scope and any relevant legal authorization, e.g., search warrant. Third, consult with the designated case manager, legal counsel, or prosecuting attorney to discuss the finding and its potential relevance. Fourth, obtain explicit written authorization before proceeding with any further analysis or reporting of the new information. This process ensures that all actions are legally sound, ethically justifiable, and contribute to the integrity of the forensic investigation. Question 17. To address the challenge of acquiring volatile process and system resource information from a suspect's live system without compromising the integrity of potential evidence, which of the following methodologies best adheres to the principles of forensic soundness and regulatory compliance expected of a certified forensic computer examiner? Option A. Utilizing specialized live acquisition tools designed to capture volatile data such as running processes, network connections, and memory contents, while minimizing system interaction and documenting all steps meticulously. Option B, rebooting the suspect's system into a forensic analysis environment and then examining the system state for process and resource information. Option C, performing a standard disk image of the suspect's system and then analyzing the resulting image for process information, assuming all relevant data will be preserved in the static image. Option D, directly interacting with the operating system's task manager to identify and record running processes, and then manually documenting system resource utilization metrics. The correct answer is A, utilizing specialized live acquisition tools designed to capture volatile data such as running processes, network connections, and memory contents, while minimizing system interaction and documenting all steps meticulously. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics: the need to preserve volatile system resources and process information without altering the evidence. This is particularly critical in a certified forensic computer examiner (CFCE) context, where adherence to strict legal and regulatory frameworks is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the imperative to collect comprehensive data with the absolute requirement to maintain the integrity of the digital evidence, ensuring it is admissible in legal proceedings. The correct approach involves employing methods that capture process and system resource data in a forensically sound manner, minimizing any potential for alteration or destruction of the original data. This aligns with the core principles of digital forensics, emphasizing the preservation of evidence integrity. Best professional practice dictates using specialized tools and techniques designed for volatile data acquisition, often involving live system analysis or imaging techniques that create a bit-for-bit copy of the storage media. This ensures that the original evidence remains untouched and that any analysis is performed on a forensically sound copy. Incorrect approaches would involve actions that could compromise evidence integrity. For instance, directly interacting with running processes on the live system in a way that could terminate or modify them, or relying on standard operating system tools that may log or alter system states, would be professionally unacceptable. Such actions could lead to the loss of critical volatile data, such as active network connections, running processes, or memory contents, which are often crucial for reconstructing events. This would violate the fundamental ethical and legal obligations of a forensic examiner to preserve evidence in its original state. Regulatory frameworks, such as those implicitly understood within the CFCE certification, mandate that all forensic procedures must be repeatable, verifiable, and demonstrably non-intrusive to the original evidence. Failure to adhere to these principles can result in the exclusion of evidence from court, undermining the entire investigation. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a systematic evaluation of potential actions against established forensic principles and relevant legal standards. Examiners must first identify the type of data required, e.g., volatile vs. non-volatile, and the potential risks associated with its acquisition. They should then select the least intrusive, most forensically sound method available, prioritizing tools and techniques that have been validated for evidence preservation. Documentation of every step taken, including the tools used and their versions, is also critical for demonstrating the integrity of the forensic process. Question 18. Governance review demonstrates a need to understand the initial execution pathways of unauthorized software on a suspect workstation. The workstation is currently powered on. Which of the following approaches best preserves the integrity of the evidence related to the boot process and startup files while enabling a thorough forensic analysis? Option A. Immediately power down the workstation to prevent further changes and then boot from a forensic live CD to examine startup files and memory. Option B. Initiate a remote forensic acquisition of the suspect drive while the system is running and then analyze the acquired image for startup files and boot sector information. Option C. Connect a hardware write blocker to the primary storage device, boot the system normally, and then use forensic tools to capture volatile memory and analyze startup files from the mounted drive. Option D. Boot the workstation from a forensic live CD, mount the suspect drive read-only, and then analyze the operating system's boot loader, registry hives, and startup program locations. The correct answer is A. Immediately power down the workstation to prevent further changes and then boot from a forensic live CD to examine startup files and memory. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of the boot process and startup files is critical for establishing a timeline and understanding system behavior. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and preserving volatile data that is overwritten or altered during the boot sequence, while simultaneously ensuring that the examination of non-volatile startup files does not inadvertently modify them, thus compromising their evidentiary value. The examiner must navigate the complexities of operating system initialization to extract meaningful forensic data without introducing bias or contamination. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a methodical, forensically sound process that prioritizes the preservation of volatile data before examining non-volatile artifacts. This aligns with established digital forensic principles and best practices, which emphasize minimizing alteration of the original evidence. Specifically, capturing volatile memory, RAM, during the boot process, if feasible and appropriate for the case, provides a snapshot of the system state before significant changes occur. Subsequently, examining startup files from a forensic image, rather than the live system, ensures that the integrity of these files is maintained. This approach adheres to the principle of least privilege and non-interference, crucial for maintaining the admissibility of evidence in legal proceedings. While the CFCE exam does not specify a particular jurisdiction's laws, the core principles of digital forensics are universally recognized and are implicitly expected to be followed. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly modifying system registry settings or deleting files on the live system to isolate specific startup processes. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it directly alters the evidence. Such actions would violate the fundamental principle of preserving evidence integrity, making any subsequent findings unreliable and inadmissible. It demonstrates a lack of understanding of forensic methodology and the potential for chain of custody breaches. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on user-level tools or standard operating system utilities that are not designed for forensic examination. These tools often log their actions, modify timestamps, or fail to capture all relevant data, thereby compromising the evidence. Ethically, this represents a failure to employ appropriate forensic tools and techniques, potentially leading to incomplete or misleading conclusions. Legally, it could be challenged as insufficient or improper examination. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the boot sequence entirely and focus only on application-level data. This is a failure to conduct a comprehensive forensic examination. The boot process and startup files are crucial for understanding the system's initial state, the execution of malware, or the activation of unauthorized programs. Omitting this critical phase can lead to a flawed analysis and missed crucial evidence, which is an ethical and professional failing. Professional reasoning. When faced with a scenario involving the boot process and startup files, a forensic examiner must first consider the case objectives and the nature of the evidence. The primary decision-making framework involves 1. Prioritizing evidence preservation. Always aim to collect volatile data first if possible, and then work with forensic images of non-volatile data. 2. Employing forensically sound tools and methodologies. Utilize tools specifically designed for digital forensics that are validated and known to minimize alteration of evidence. 3. Documenting all actions. Maintain a detailed log of every step taken, including tools used, commands executed, and observations made. 4. Understanding the operating system's boot sequence. Possess a thorough knowledge of how the operating system initializes, including the roles of the BIOS/UEFI, bootloader, kernel, and various startup services and applications. This knowledge informs the selection of appropriate collection and analysis techniques. Question 19. Operational review demonstrates that a critical system outage has occurred, and a senior executive is demanding an immediate explanation for the cause, emphasizing the need for a swift resolution to minimize business impact. The forensic examiner has identified several potential indicators of compromise, but has not yet completed the full forensic imaging, analysis, and validation of the evidence. The executive is pressing for a preliminary conclusion to inform immediate business decisions. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the forensic examiner in this situation? Option A. Conduct a full forensic examination, meticulously documenting all steps and findings, and provide a comprehensive report only after all analysis and validation are complete, clearly communicating the estimated timeline for this process to the executive. Option B. Rely on past experience with similar outages to offer a probable cause without conducting a full forensic examination, as time is of the essence. Option C. Provide a preliminary assessment based on the initial indicators of compromise, acknowledging that the analysis is incomplete to satisfy the executive's immediate need for information. Option D. Focus on reporting only the most obvious and easily explainable indicators of compromise that support a plausible theory of the outage, omitting any complex or ambiguous findings. The correct answer is A. Conduct a full forensic examination, meticulously documenting all steps and findings, and provide a comprehensive report only after all analysis and validation are complete, clearly communicating the estimated timeline for this process to the executive. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the desire to quickly resolve an issue and the fundamental principles of digital forensics. The examiner is pressured to provide an immediate, albeit potentially incomplete, answer without fully adhering to established forensic procedures. This pressure can lead to compromised evidence integrity and a violation of professional ethics. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the integrity of the digital evidence and adheres to the established methodologies of digital forensics, which are implicitly governed by the principles of the Certified Forensic Computer Examiner (CFCE) framework. This framework, while not a specific statute, embodies the ethical and procedural standards expected of a forensic examiner. By conducting a thorough examination, documenting all steps, and only reporting findings based on validated procedures, the examiner upholds the principles of objectivity, accuracy, and defensibility, which are paramount in legal and investigative contexts. This aligns with the core tenets of digital forensics: to preserve, identify, extract, document, and interpret evidence in a manner that is admissible in court. An incorrect approach that involves providing a preliminary assessment without full validation fails to uphold the principle of scientific rigor. This can lead to inaccurate conclusions, potentially misdirecting an investigation or unfairly implicating an individual. Ethically, it breaches the duty of care to conduct a complete and accurate examination. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively presenting findings to satisfy external pressure, is a severe ethical violation. It compromises the examiner's impartiality and the integrity of the forensic process, potentially leading to a miscarriage of justice. This directly contravenes the expectation of unbiased reporting inherent in professional forensic practice. A third incorrect approach, which involves relying on anecdotal experience or assumptions rather than documented procedures, undermines the scientific and repeatable nature of digital forensics. This can be challenged in legal proceedings as lacking a sound methodological basis. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the forensic process and its ethical underpinnings. When faced with pressure for expediency, the examiner must first reaffirm the importance of adhering to established protocols. This involves clearly communicating the time and resources required for a proper forensic examination. If the pressure persists, the examiner should document all requests for expedited or incomplete analysis and consult with their supervisor or legal counsel. The ultimate decision must prioritize the integrity of the evidence and the ethical obligations of the profession over external pressures. Question 20. The control framework reveals that a forensic examiner is tasked with acquiring data from a suspect hard drive. The primary objective is to preserve the integrity of the original evidence while creating a forensically sound copy for subsequent analysis. Considering the established principles of digital forensics and the need to prevent any alteration of the source media, which of the following actions best upholds these requirements? Option A. Analyze the suspect drive directly using specialized software without creating an initial image. Option B. Connect the suspect drive directly to the forensic workstation and initiate a file system copy to a separate drive. Option C. Connect the suspect drive to a standard computer and perform a quick format before imaging. Option D. Utilize a hardware write-blocking device between the suspect drive and the forensic workstation before creating a bit-for-bit image. The correct answer is B. Connect the suspect drive directly to the forensic workstation and initiate a file system copy to a separate drive. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in digital forensics where the integrity of evidence is paramount, but the practicalities of data acquisition and analysis can introduce potential contamination. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive data collection with the imperative to preserve the original state of the digital evidence, adhering to established forensic principles. The examiner must navigate the technical complexities of imaging volatile data while ensuring that their actions do not alter or destroy the very evidence they are tasked with preserving. This requires a deep understanding of forensic methodologies and a commitment to meticulous documentation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves employing a right-blocking device during the imaging process. This is a cornerstone of forensic science principles, specifically the principle of data integrity and non-alteration. A right blocker ensures that the forensic workstation cannot send any data to the source media, thereby preventing any accidental or intentional modification of the original evidence. This aligns directly with the fundamental requirement in digital forensics to collect evidence in a forensically sound manner, as mandated by numerous professional guidelines and best practices within the CFCE framework. By using a right blocker, the examiner upholds the principle of preserving the original evidence, ensuring its admissibility and reliability in legal proceedings. This method directly supports the chain of custody and the overall trustworthiness of the forensic findings. Incorrect approaches analysis. Directly connecting the suspect drive to the forensic workstation without a right blocker is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action violates the principle of non-alteration of evidence. The forensic workstation, by its very nature, will attempt to read the drive and in doing so could inadvertently write data to the suspect drive e.g. through mounting the file system, updating access times, or even minor operating system interactions. This alteration compromises the integrity of the original evidence, rendering it potentially inadmissible and undermining the credibility of the forensic examination. It fails to meet the basic standard of forensically sound acquisition. Imaging the suspect drive directly to a standard, non-forensic hard drive without first creating a bit-for-bit image using a right blocker is also professionally unacceptable. While the intent might be to capture data, the lack of a right blocker still poses the risk of altering the source drive. Furthermore, using a non-forensic drive for initial acquisition bypasses the controlled environment and validated tools typically used in forensic imaging, increasing the likelihood of errors or data corruption. This approach fails to adhere to the principle of using forensically sound methods and tools. Attempting to analyze the suspect drive directly without creating an image is the most egregious violation. This is fundamentally contrary to the principles of digital forensics. Direct analysis inherently involves interacting with the suspect drive, which will inevitably lead to alterations, such as updating file access times, modifying metadata, and potentially even overriding data. This approach completely disregards the need to preserve the original state of the evidence and would render any subsequent findings unreliable and inadmissible. It represents a complete failure to follow established forensic science principles and methodologies. Professional reasoning. When faced with the task of acquiring digital evidence, a forensic examiner must always prioritize the preservation of the original evidence. The decision-making process should begin with identifying the critical forensic principles at play, primarily data integrity and non-alteration. The examiner must then select tools and methodologies that strictly adhere to these principles. This involves a thorough understanding of the capabilities and limitations of their equipment, particularly right-blocking hardware and forensically sound imaging software. The process should always involve creating a bit-for-bit copy of the original media onto a separate, forensically validated storage medium, using a right blocker to prevent any modifications to the source. Documentation of every step, including the use of specific tools and their configurations, is crucial for maintaining the chain of custody and demonstrating the forensically sound nature of the examination.